Business Connections Live, the UK's leading online business channel. This is Business Connections Live with Steve Hyland.
Hello there, welcome along. This is Business Connections Live, the program for entrepreneurs, SMEs and business owners. Today's show then, we're going to be discussing how to take your business to organisational excellence. A lot of us think that we're all very well organised. In fact, we were having a chat before we started the programme today, just how unorganised most small businesses are. And it does seem the smaller you are, sometimes the more difficult it is to get those organisational processes in place. Today, that's what we're going to be talking about, because by doing that, it could actually change the fortunes of your particular business. Joining me in the studio today is an old friend of the program, is Paul Glynn. He's from Sandler Training, Southern Counties. Paul, lovely as always to see you. Every time we see you, there's less off you.
Less of me?
Less off you. You. I mean, the first time we met, you're this big bloke, and now you've slimmed away. You're looking very young and handsome.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sandler, for those people that don't know anything about Sandler and what that means and who you are, just give us a brief synopsis of your background and what you're all about.
Okay, Sandler Training, we've been around for quite some years now. Here in the UK, I think we're in like year 13, 14, something like that. I've been running my franchise within the network for 9 years now. Basically, we help organisations who have got challenges when it comes to revenue generation, whether that be through sales or management training, or whether it be customer service assistance with that, or whatever it requires, whether it be training, coaching, mentoring. Those are the sort of things that we get involved with.
Is there something you find yourself repeating I always ask you this question, it's always interesting to me. Is there something that you find yourself repeating on an ongoing basis when you get a new client on board, that it just seems to be the kind of things that nearly everybody seems to get wrong? Is there a commonality, if that's a real word, between the problems that businesses have?
Yes, in fact, to such an extent that people say, well, what kind of business do you concentrate on, Paul? And I say, well, we are completely across the board, because we're hearing very, very similar problems, regardless of industry, regardless of size, regardless of what vertical. So it typically comes down to the fact that people don't really know quite what it is they perhaps should know. They're not entirely sure how they should go about doing things, particularly when it comes to revenue generation. And what we're going to be talking about today is even broader than that still. It's actually looking at the whole of the business, and what are the sort of the steps that we need to be taking to make sure that we really are going in the right direction. None of it, in many ways, is rocket science, but it's a question of really having that courage and really knowing that you're absolutely on the right path. So that's the commonality. It's everybody is trying to find a way, but it's a question of knowing that you've absolutely nailed each piece and knowing how best to do it.
When you go in then, of course, you're going to be meeting startups, entrepreneurs, established business owners, and you're saying that they actually are all suffering from a very similar kind of ineptitude when it comes to processes. Is it processes that we all fall down on? Yeah. We mentioned things like, I nearly call it Confusionsoft a moment ago, because that's what it is, Infusionsoft, or any of these autoresponders or these packages that follow up on sales leads and things like that. And many businesses will own them, many businesses will try to implement them, but in fact they can't get the processes right in their own head to turn it from a process into a working operation. And do you see that as well when it comes to what you try to implement, that they just can't get the processes out of their heads and onto paper?
A lot of it comes down to that. I totally agree with you, Steve. In actual fact, when we start up in business, we expect to really spending our time doing the thing that we're good at, whether that be IT support, or whether it be making a widget, or whatever that we're actually good at. That's what we thought we were getting into business to do. In actual fact, it's not. There's so many other things around that. There's well, how are we going to sell that widget, and how are we going to be most effective in getting all the processes around the business part of things. I mean, how do we look after people? How do we look after processes? All of this stuff that really, you think, well, what's that got to do with what is it I'm trying to do? And the answer is not an awful lot, apart from a lot, in the sense that if we haven't got those things right, it doesn't matter how brilliant we are as the accountant, how brilliant we are at the IT, none of those things are going to produce proper revenue if we don't know what it is we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and where we're going.
Is it the old thing about we don't know what we don't know? You don't know what you don't know. Is it a case of that? My best Jack Nicholson there?
Well, I think we kind of. Oh dear, I don't know how to put this, because I don't want to suggest that people don't know how to run their own business. Of course they do, but it's a question of sometimes we're just so busy in actually doing the business that it's hard to see the wood for the trees. So that's really.
Is this the working in the business or for the business kind of thing?
I was trying not to say that, but that's exactly.
You go right ahead and say it.
We're so involved in the business, and to actually better take a step back and look at what it is we actually are supposed to be doing, and who's supposed to be doing it, and how we're supposed to be doing it. That's a really, really hard thing to do. In fact, we were having that discussion, weren't we, before the meeting?
Well, it's interesting because you hear that a lot from people, don't you, when they talk about this, and everybody outside of your business can always tell you how you should be running your business. Is that a resistance that you come up against sometimes when you go in there and you go, here are the processes you need to be looking at, and you get that resistance because they feel they know how to run their own business and you don't?
Well, as you know from my previous visits here, that's the last thing.
Come a bit closer. You're going away from me there. I do frighten you, I know that.
The last thing I would ever try and do is to tell people what it is they should be doing. One, for example, I'm trying to get them to take on our resources. I don't try and say, look, you don't know how to sell, let me show you how to sell, for example. That just doesn't work. People are going to quite rightly resist that. It's much more a question of helping people realise what it is they need to do. Take them there, get them to tell me what the problems are. So I don't get quite that resistance, but I do get the resistance of, are they actually wanting to even have that conversation? Do they really, really want to really face up to the things that they know they need to fix? But are they willing to spend the time, the resources, the change it's going to take to actually get those things right?
Now, like a tree, we have a trunk and we have a number of branches coming off it, and off the branches there are a number of leaves. So we can break this down into a number of small pieces, but fundamentally we've got an illustration here of the 6 key things that we're going to be talking about today. Let's have a look at those 6 key things. We've got a little graphic on the screen here. So we're going to be working our way around this, aren't we? So planning, positions, people, processes, performetrics. That's a made-up American word, isn't it? And passion as well. Just talk us through where we're going to go on this journey today.
Right. Well, basically, those 6 steps, those 6 stages, actually, would you believe, break down to 24 separate steps. In fact, just planning has 10 of those. I suppose that's not a huge surprise, because really and truly, it's the planning stage which is perhaps the key if we're going to go to any new place.
That's foundation, isn't it? That's the real foundations. We're not building our whole empire on sand, are we? So strong foundations are important. Decent planning.
Absolutely. But that planning goes right back to what's the vision that we've got for the organisation? Have we revisited that vision in any sort of sensible format in any length of time? And then we're going to have to look at things like the obvious things like SWOT analysis and pest analysis. I'm sure... For
those people that aren't familiar with the acronyms, they are...
Right. SWOT is looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So as to say, looking at the things that are internal, the strengths and weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats which are external to the business. So you think, well, hang on a second, that doesn't take a huge amount of thought to work out what those things are. And in many ways, it doesn't. But having said that, it takes quite a lot of time. If you're really going to do that properly, and really sort of get all of the people in the organisation who are involved in the success of the business to actually put their input into that SWOT analysis, and then be able to report back internally to the business to say, look, this is what we're good at, this is who we are, this is why we're even in business. And then in addition to that, we're also going to look at pest, looking at the external factors, things like the political, the economic, the social and the technological environment that we're working in, because then that gives us a better, clearer picture as to why we're even in business, and therefore we can start to then compare ourselves with the competitors. We've got to do a competitor analysis. So there's 3 of the 10 planning step, 4 in fact, being that vision, setting that vision. But as you can imagine, each one of those is going to take some time. You can't just scribble that down on the back of an envelope. So it's a question of how do we make sure that's done? How do we make sure we actually go through all 24 steps of those kind?
Is it sometimes, do you think, when you talk to businesses about this, that it becomes an onerous challenge, and what they'll do is they'll go, that's all very well, they step back and end up doing none of it?
Or they do 1 or 2 of them, like, for example, when you had to set your business plan for your bank, for example, when you really first started in business, no doubt that the bank asked you, in effect, for a SWOT analysis. So you did that, or even maybe a pest analysis, or a competitor analysis, or a pricing analysis. All of those things we actually did, but then that's it. We did it the once.
Well, we put them in the safe, and then we leave them there, don't we? The business plan is in the safe. It's never updated. It's never looked at again because things change.
Things really change. I don't know about you, but my business looks so different from a year ago. So a year ago, that would suggest that each year, really and truly, we should be looking at doing this kind of planning process. But the full 6 Ps, as we're going to go through, probably, ideally every year, but certainly every period of time. Otherwise, how can we build a business? We're only going to be, instead of an exceptional business, at best, we can only be an average business, maybe a well-run business. Hopefully not an at-risk business. But if we want to be an exceptional business, we really do have to start concentrating and go right back to the stuff that we know we should be doing.
And the chances are your business isn't doing it. And honestly, we had the conversation before we started, and it just seems to me that nearly every business isn't doing it in some way or another. My guest on today's show is Paul Glynn, Sandler Training, Southern Counties is my guest, and more from Paul as we work our way through the 6 Ps on this edition of Business Connections Live. So it's great to have your company here. We're live on a Monday, as we always are, and it's nice to know that you're out there. Thank you very much for all the lovely comments that we get back from you, and also all those people that are downloading the program on iTunes. More about that a little bit later on in the program. Let's go back a week now, and this is something that we also talked about before maybe I shouldn't be saying all this. We have a bit of a chat before we start the show. Last week we had David Holland from Exceller on the program. He was talking about the 3 mistakes that undermine the ROI from marketing. I suppose what we were looking at was the ways that you could take your marketing, maybe some automation, the way that you can then respond to it. And I wonder sometimes, do we take things out of individual context? We're talking here with Paul about a complete solution to the problem. And is it probably easier for us as business owners to go, I'm not going to look at the complete solution. What I'm going to do, I'm going to cherry pick the bits that I feel I can do. And maybe then you go off down the route of your autoresponders or your Infusionsoft or your Active Campaign or whatever, and you think that's going to be the thing that's going to resolve your issue. It was a good program last week, as always, and David was a fantastic guest. Just to give you some of the key things that he came up with, here's a bit of a recap from last week's edition of Business Connections Live. Now, we've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about the 3 mistakes that undermine your return on investment from your marketing. I mean, we all do it. We've all got to do it. Marketing is pretty fundamental within any business. Are you doing it effectively? And are you really getting your money back from the effort that you put into it? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And also some ideas where you can increase your ROI from your marketing. Joining me in the studio is David Holland. He's the CEO and founder of Exceller.
Most businesses don't really connect with their customers. Most businesses don't really connect with their prospects. So from that point of view, it's pretty much unchanged over the years, and the digital part of it probably hasn't made as much impact into a lot of businesses as it actually could have done. Yeah, I think that they're worried that it is complicated, and the digital marketing industry makes it feel complicated. And if you start to get involved, then there's always new little things coming out all the time, which can be very, very overwhelming. So there is a tendency to think that you're going to get drawn into this really complicated thing you don't understand. It's going to cost you a lot of money, and it'll be out of control. So it's best not to do it at all, because at least you're not out of control, and at least you're not wasting the money. Well, the thing to think about, in my view, is I'd really like to have a list of prospects who have some interest or could be interested, the right sort of people that may well be interested in what I do, and at some point in time they would value what I actually do. So I've got the list, and then I'm just going to communicate with those people, giving them as much value as I possibly can until the point those people are actually now interested to buy. The majority of businesses kind of don't do anything to generate the leads, or they do one thing or two things, and they tend to be a little bit general. So the advertising, and one of the biggest issues that I see most businesses of any sort, actually any size, having with advertising is they kind of seem to think that you can create an advert that will talk to everybody. And that's really difficult. You know, to get one message, one advert that would talk to absolutely everybody is really difficult. So another one of the mistakes that many businesses make is they don't communicate back with their existing customers who we've got a relationship with, and maybe it's time to tell them about some of the other things that we do. So almost every business has a list of some description. It might not be a big list, it might be 50, 60 people, or thousands of people, but there we have some contacts, and that's usually the best place to start, is to market to my existing customers. So it's like any set of tools. It's easier if somebody shows you how to use them, and then you develop some skills in how to use the tools, but it doesn't have to be complex. Just simple things, simple communications, send out some emails, have a little series of emails, and it can be very, very easy to learn how to put those into place and to get them to work. And then of course what lots of people would then do is try and think of a new idea. You don't know what's wrong with the first idea. If the first idea is working, just keep it going, keep it going. So we've got customers that have been running the same kind of advertising strategy to get people onto the list for years. There were some statistics that I read recently that a buyer is 9 times more likely to buy if they're contacted inside 30 minutes of that first kind of interaction. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I'm David Holland from Exceller Limited. The real key for me is we need a tool, we need some kind of automation to take care of the marketing and the sales that are going on in the business, as well as the invoicing and the follow-up. So have a tool, then use the tool nice and simply to get started. And what we're trying to do with the marketing concept that we're discussing today is to communicate with people, communicate with human beings, and continuously communicate with human beings, adding value until they put their hands up and say, yes, please, I am interested in the conversation now. And then we just follow up with that. So develop the relationship and continuously discuss and keep the relationship going with our customers and prospects. And that's what gives us consistency. Once we've got consistency, the stress and the pressure of running a business just eases a little bit, because we know we're going to get a continuous flow of new business and money coming in at the end of the month.
Generated a lot of talk, actually, that one. David Holland was with us, as I said, on last week's edition of the programme, 4 mistakes that undermine ROI when it comes to your marketing. It's a really good show as well. If you're not familiar with autoresponders, Infusionsoft, ActiveCampaign, all those kind of things, do you need them in your business? I suppose that's the big question. Are they something you should have? Are they right for some? And are they wrong for others? How do you actually have a process? Do you have a process within your organisation that takes you from your first introduction all the way through to finally turning maybe a prospect into a sale at some stage? Let me ask you this question. Your LinkedIn account, how often do you link in with somebody on LinkedIn and then do nothing with that link? Do nothing with it. You don't even respond back to it. Don't even say thank you very much for linking in. So you see their name, you think, yeah, they'd be interesting to link in with. What? Why? So you link in with them and they come back and they say, yep, thank you very much for linking in with me. Sometimes you'll get just they've linked in, so they haven't responded with you. You haven't really responded with them. Is that a conversation? And is that of any value to anybody? I don't know. You're going to have to answer that question for me. Is that of any value?
You're asking the wrong person.
No, you're meant to be an expert. Listen, we'll talk in a sec. You're watching We're watching Business Connections Live. I mean, just ask yourself the question. If you've got a comment, stick it up on Facebook, stick it up on Twitter. Do what you want with it. We'll have a look and we'll have a bit of an open debate about that, I think, sometime in the future. By the way, if you'd like to get in touch with us here at the Prom, it's dead easy to do that. All you've got to do is drop us an email to studio@businessconnectionslive.com. Ask the question, would you like a program like this one? If you would, then we could do it for you. Just drop us an email. We'll tell you how you can go about doing it. The other way you can do it, which is even better, and people just don't use it anymore, it's if you've got one of these smart devices that you carry around with you, they've got this amazing app on all of them, and it's called the telephone app. And what you can do, you can pick your... I know, people just do not use that app enough. Pick the phone up, give us a call on this telephone number. It is 01784 256 777. Have a word with us here at Business Connections Live, or of course you can follow our stream of consciousness, yet another app on your smartphone, through Twitter at BCL Business TV, yet another app. You can also watch the program live each and every week and leave comments at Facebook, of course. But there are over 300 hours of great business advice if you go along to the website at businessconnectionslive.com. And there's a new page on the site as well that shows you all the archive programs. And for the first, I put that on there a couple of weeks back now. When I did that, I was amazed at the titles that come. Just reams, pages of great shows to help you grow your business. In fact, if you go on there, you'll see Paul has done a number of programs for us when we've looked at what Sandler can bring you, what the different training techniques are, sales techniques, very important, all of that kind of stuff. And you'll find it on our website. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. My guest in the studio today is Paul Glynn, Sandler Trading, Southern Counties, and we're talking about the 6 P's today on how you can develop and grow your business through organisational excellence. I was alluding then to people being inactive, people not doing anything. In fact, Rolson came in during that little break, and he was that is a big problem, isn't it? Everyone knows what they need to do, but very few people actually get about doing it. And it seems that the few that do are the ones that are successful.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I suppose that's really what we're talking about. I mean, if we're going to have an average company, then, as you were saying, cherry picking, doing the things that we kind of like doing, that's fine, and that will do us. But if we want to be very well run, we have to do an awful lot more than that. But if you want to be an excellent organisation, then you need to be doing the full package and really spending the time to really get all 24 steps that we've been starting to talk about now absolutely done on a regular basis.
Don't worry, I got the hint there. Do you stand in the pulpit and do you say this is what you should do, while at the same time not doing it yourself? Because there is that temptation, isn't there, that you know the bits that you too, you're human, you can cherry pick as well. Is that the difficulty, the fact that we are human, and to follow through a process sometimes can be quite difficult to do?
Absolutely. For that reason, as we were explaining before the show, we at Sandler kind of insist on not just showing some stuff to a potential client or a new client and then leaving them to it, because it's so hard to work through all this stuff. So we actually work on a regular basis with our clients, every week, every month, whatever it may be, webinars, whatever it's required to really get that constant contact going, because otherwise all of these good ideas, all these things, all this good intention for action or change of habit is just going to be lost. So this whole program of contact, which will probably take something up to a year, for example, for this particular program we're talking about now, to make sure that each step is absolutely done and it's not allowed just to become a good idea and left in the drawer. It's got to be something that's live and kept going.
Living and breathing.
Living and breathing. But you do need, I mean, not necessarily us, but you do need to have somebody to be working with outside the organisation to hold your feet to the fire and say, have you done that bit? Have you done step 13? Have you done your organisational chart? Have you worked out what's supposed to be happening next? If not, why not? No more excuse, you've got to get this done. That's the homework. go ahead and
There is this danger all the time, and it comes into my head when I think about it. It's like the old gold rush. The people that made all the money in the gold rush were the people that sold the picks and shovels and the hammers. Are you selling picks and shovels, or are you actually part of the prospecting? Do you get in there and get your hands dirty when it comes to looking for the nuggets of gold?
So I'm not entirely understanding what your question
Well,
is.
I love it when you do this to me. The question is, you're selling a service,
Yes.
and people will actually go through the process of the service with you to keep you happy, nearly. But are you just selling the tools, or do you get in with the nitty gritty?
Am I actually using the same tools?
The same tools,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely. Yes. I mean, I'm running my
Thank
own
you for
business.
catching up, by the way.
I run my own business. I go out and find my own clients. I go and do my own training. So although I've got a small team around me, and certainly a whole network of 27 of us here in the UK and 270 of us across the world, no, each one of us, we absolutely are living and breathing what it is that we're actually suggesting people might like to try and use. It's not a question of do as I do, don't do as I'm doing. We're absolutely in there. We do it. We absolutely do it.
Let's just remind ourselves of the process. So it's 6 parts of process. Of those 6 parts, it breaks itself down into 24 individual steps. We don't have those individual steps on screen, so you might want to get yourself a pen and paper to jot down some of the ideas that come up in this particular edition. So we kind of talked a little bit about planning.
Yep.
Should we just continue and just go through those steps again to reinforce the key things that we need to be aware of when it comes to planning, and then we'll move on to positions?
Yeah, fine.
So let's kick off then. Planning.
Well, yes, indeed. The most obvious thing is to have your vision, your mission and vision clear. Obviously, when we start the business, that's something that hopefully we have done, but then we've got to go back and revisit that. And so therefore, we need to be looking at the external economy that we're working in, as I say, the political, economic, social and technological environment we're in, and then we need to look at our SWOT analysis, our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. That analysis has got to be done. We've then got to do a competitor analysis. So in other words, we need to know where it is that we're actually supposed to be driving the organisation to. That's what I mean by planning. So then we've got those essential building blocks into place. Then we can then work on who needs to be in the business, and then how are we going to actually do that? How are we going to accomplish that
Do you
vision?
find, what's the reaction you get once they've done that planning, that self-analysis? Do you sometimes feel that companies become maybe demotivated because they don't feel there is a place for them, that really the business that they're selling isn't a business? Do you ever find that?
I'm afraid to say the answer is no, or in the sense that, if anything, what we're finding is that people get absolutely fired up with what comes next, or what they were perhaps doing in the past. They're having to change quite dramatically, perhaps the marketplace they're operating in. They're going to go up the food chain, perhaps. For example, one of my clients was very much involved in very small organisations. They're now realising that they're in the kind of strength and that kind of place to really to be deliberately not looking for those small businesses, to deliberately looking for those larger organisations. Another client of mine is actually realising that rather than the kind of fairly bread and butter stuff that they thought they were good at and what they should be concentrating on, there's actually a whole new marketplace for the luxury end of their particular industry, which nobody really is attacking. So by doing this sort of analysis, it's opening up completely new vistas. Now, there is a real challenge to that, of course, because it means they've got to now figure out, well, hang on a second, how can we really cater to that marketplace? Do we have the right skills and people in place to really, really cater for that? Is that something that we have got the confidence to walk into, or is that something perhaps we should just leave to somebody else? But
does that become a barrier then for them entering that particular marketplace, or would your advice be, well, look, just get on and do it, just try it? Because that's the other thing, inaction, isn't it? You know, all of a sudden you start to discover all these different things,
right,
and all that then becomes the problem, and you then don't react to any of it.
But on the other hand, if one's vision, if one's mission is not to do that, is not to become that a higher end operating organisation, it is just to stay sensible and contained and just very, very good at what you do, then that's it. That is the vision. So I'm just saying, you were saying, do people then find that they are perhaps realising that they shouldn't even be in business, I think was your question. I'm saying we don't come across that. It's more a question of really realising what is the strength, what is it we're supposed to be doing, what is it we actually want as business owners. What is it? I mean, what's the reason why we get out of bed every day? It isn't simply to give a job to our colleagues, our employees. There's a reason for being in business, and sometimes we kind of miss that, or we've lost it a little bit because we're just so taken up with what's happening each day. We're just trying to keep our customer satisfied, as the song says. But it's a question of really getting back to that real vision and mission and understanding why it is we're doing this. That's what that planning stage is about.
Well, we're going to have to move off the planning stage. Are we allowed to list the key things that are in this process, the 24 steps, so that if somebody has got a pen and paper, they can jot them down very quickly. So what are they then?
The planning bit is develop your personal vision, right? And then build the organisational vision, mission and values. Then we can analyse the external externalities. Do the SWOT analysis of step 4. But they can then, having done that, we then revisit the organisational vision. Because sometimes we realise that we should be going somewhere else rather than where we thought we were going, as we've just been discussing a moment ago. So that's number 5. Number 6, identify key priorities and then establish expectations for each of those key priorities. That itself is quite a challenge. So then, once we've got those priorities in place, we can put some action plans in place. But for that, step 9, we've got to allocate the required resources to make sure we can actually then do that plan. It could be the fact we haven't got those resources and we have to sort of scale it back and start the thought process again. And step 10, we can then establish and adhere to a regular review process. Because, as I say, it's a living, breathing thing. It can't be done just at once.
All right, so let's just bring the chart up once again to remind us what we're talking about. So 6 steps. We've looked at planning now.
Yep.
So let's now move on to number 2, positions. Now, positions, I get the impression there aren't as many steps within this, but they're just as important.
Oh, yeah. I don't think any one of the 24 steps it can be missed out. And if you look through it logically, I think it's the reason why I so like this whole thing, because each and every single step in itself is not, rocket science, as I've been saying.
It's a complicated liver operation.
But no, it's not. It's not. But the things, you can't really miss anything out. When you see it logically, you think, well, which one of these would you miss out? And the answer is, well, none of them. But sometimes it doesn't obviously come to mind. Oh gosh, yes, we need to do that. Like the obvious thing about, it is obvious when you say it, allocate the resources to make sure that the plan can be put into place. So many organisations just don't do that. They just say, well, we've got this fantastic idea, and then we don't allocate the resources to it. So it's not going to work. So that's an obvious step.
Built-in failure.
Built-in failure, thank you. So when it comes to positions, we're looking at the structure, the positions and skill set required to achieve that organisational excellence. Now, I'm not going to look at necessarily the people doing it for the moment. That comes in a moment. But it's a question of, what is actually required. So number 11 is we're going to determine the structure needed to implement the plan. That's not necessarily just individual people, because people can have different positions. They can have more than one role. But what are those roles that they need? Because we're going to identify the skill sets and attributes needed for each of those positions. So then we can work out whether we've actually got the right people in place. Because number 13 is to then create and update the job description for everybody in the organisation. I don't know.
So that's clarity then, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Making sure that everybody knows what it is they're supposed to be doing. But more importantly, at this stage, we're working out, well, what is it we think they should be doing? What is their job function? When was the last time even for a small business, if you think, okay, I've got 1 or 2 people in my business, they don't need a job description. They know what they need to do. Everybody just comes in Monday morning, gets on with it. But that's not fair. That's not even true. The more we understand as a team member what it is that we are actually required to do, what is our job specification, what it is that the job entails, then we've got better chance of absolutely meeting that, rather than wondering why the boss is starting to get a bit cross because we don't know what it is that he's after. We don't know what it is that we've been missing because it hasn't been made clear. So we need to be fair and clear, and the clarity you're talking about exactly is to have it actually written down. What is the job specification? Has it been updated the last year?
All right then, let's just bring that graphic back up on the screen just for 1 minute so we can see where we are. So we've looked at planning and we've looked at positions. In just a moment we're going to talk about the people, and we're also going to be talking about the processes, which will take us nicely through the hour. If you are writing this down, I hope you're finding it interesting. You can obviously watch the program whenever you want, just by simply going to businessconnectionslive.com and watching the program. Do we have any downloads or any advice or any tip sheets on this particular program from you guys?
I'm sure we can get something done.
We put something together. We'll put something together, and you'll find that on the page at businessconnectionslive.com. Lovely to have your company as always. Really, really interesting. I just don't want you to be sitting there going, "This is great stuff. Never going to use it." Just think about this. Even if you just, at the very top level, you take away some of this information and you apply it to your business, then you're going to make a real difference, aren't you? Okay, let's get some more good advice here. You probably saw there's been a number of people in the press just recently who have really let their businesses down by the way that they have answered those difficult questions, those tough questions in business, particularly when it comes to confronting the media. Michael Dodd joined us on the programme a little while back. He's a professional speaker. He joined us back in October of last year on Business Connections Live 198. And it was all about standing up to tough questions in business, a really vital skill. Are you any good at it within your organisation? Are you any good at maybe getting your point across? Do you just not realise that sometimes if you walk away from answering the question, that perhaps you can do yourself more damage within your organisation? Well, Michael helps business people give more effective and persuasive answers in critical conversations with customers, prospects, managers, employees, and also shareholders, and probably very important these days, journalists as well. It was a good show, some good advice. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are media facing, if there's a camera in front of you, or if there is a radio microphone, a radio interviewer talking to you, well, here's some good advice on how you should handle those really tough questions.
So, I'm Michael Dodd, D-O-D-D. I'm from Australia, but I've been living in London for a long time, and I work on 6 continents around the world, not Antarctica yet. And because of my background in Australian journalism, where the journalists are really tough, Steve mentioned earlier a guy called Jeremy Paxman, and he's reasonably tough, but by Australian standards, that's not really tough. So we're used to in Australia asking blowtorch on the belly questions of people, and I can help you give answers on behalf of your business or your organisation to give great answers to tough blowtorch on the belly questions, whether they're tough questions, nasty questions, stupid questions, or my specialty area coming from Australia, really ignorant questions, which can really infuriate you. But we can equip you and your team to actually give great answers, whatever is thrown at you. And when you get it right, you not only feel far more confident because you get the content right, the structure right, and your delivery style right. You've got a right to feel confident, but you're also doing the best for the answerers, for the questioners, because the questioners deserve a great answer, and you can be shown how to do it every time.
He is such a lovely guy. He really is. Michael Dodd, there's some good stuff too. He runs a number of different training courses as well, for that matter. Standing up to tough questions in business, or the blowtorch on the belly button kind of questions, the ones that really hurt. There is a lovely piece going around at the moment. You'll find it on our website. The CEO of a particular brick company is asked about his 75 million. In fact, it's gone everywhere. It's gone. The damage that this particular executive has done, Fairburn is his name, he was asked about, yes, you're doing very well making all these bricks, but what about your £75 million bonus? And he stops the interview. Now, the damage that has caused, it wasn't at the point when he said, let's stop the interview, that was an unfortunate question. The damage is in the fact that that has now gone viral. It has been seen by not thousands of people now, but millions of people on how not to actually handle the media. It's just a shocking mistake on his part, a shocking mistake on his PR team within their organisation. He turned something that, yes, was a difficult question that he could have turned into an absolute positive. But by not being briefed, not by thinking about what he was going to do, it turned into a media disaster. One piece of advice for you. Before you do any interview, what is the worst question that somebody could ask you? What's the most difficult question? What is the one question that you really do not want to be asked when you're doing an interview with somebody? What is that question? Think about it and have an answer for it. Because if you're not that well prepared, then you shouldn't be in front of cameras, you shouldn't be in front of microphones at all. And it was a disgrace what happened, because the share price the following day tanked because of his reaction, his comment on a local regional news bulletin, which was rare in its own case, actually something of interest in a local regional news bulletin. Listen up, BBC. OK, let's move smartly on then, shall we? You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. Today we're discussing how to take your business to organisational excellence. And my guest today is Paul Glynn, Sandler Training, Southern Counties. So then, we've gone through the process. We'll just get the graphic up very quickly so we can remind ourselves. Short memory plan. Here we go. Planning, positions. We're going to be talking about people in just a moment. Leadership comes into all of this, doesn't it?
Sure.
And leadership, to a certain extent, I feel, sometimes does have blind spots. We've talked about leaders. Leaders sometimes aren't born. Leaders are made.
Sure. Because
it's from experience. But there are blind spots to leadership. What should we be aware of when it comes to leadership?
You're absolutely right. In order to really make sure that businesses can become the exceptional business that they can be, we have to be aware of the blind spots that we've got as leaders. You're absolutely right. And typically the 13, 14 different blind spots that we've identified are things like not having a process for hiring, not having a distinct process that you always follow through, which will come to people in just a second, or not having a proper way to onboard people, or just failing to tie in the corporate goals to personal goals. You think, well, why is that important? But at the end of the day, people are working for you for their reasons, not your reasons. So if you can work out what their reasons are, really tie that into what it is that the vision of the company is, you've now got a motivated team. So it's really working out how can we harness the real passions of the people we've got around us.
So bullying and fear just doesn't work then?
Well,
being psychopathic as a leader is just the wrong thing.
Well, that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah, I'm bringing that up because that's what they whisper in my ear there.
And we would also say another blind spot is not having a common language, particularly a common sales language. So, for example, if you're trying to hold people accountable to a process, if we don't have the common way of calling all those different elements, then it's very hard to then hold them to that or to train them. So if everyone's got their slightly different ways of doing things, that's not good. We've got to have that regular process actually written down and that common sales language or that common business language we've got in the business. So we're all calling the same thing. And that might sound an obvious thing, but a number of times we find that that's not happening. Or perhaps the most important blind spot we have is just not knowing how to coach. You were saying about that very, very strong leader just being authoritarian, but at the end of the day, we need to know how to coach our people. If we can do that, we're going to really be able to harness all the skills that they've got, and more importantly, if we don't coach, if we're purely on a this is how you do it, like a supervisory level, we're going to instill learned helplessness into the business. If people are always going to come to us for the answers because they can't work it out for themselves, because we've taught them that they must come to us, then that's going to be such a break on our resources. And if we're trying to lead a bit, the ideal is, if we're going to be a fantastic business, an excellent business, is that as the leader, we could, in theory, just walk away from it and it still runs. We can't do that unless we've coached our people and trained our coaches to coach people.
Well, this is the difference, isn't it? Susan Armstrong was on the programme a little while back, a couple of weeks back, and it's the difference between managing people and leading people, isn't it? And I think some leaders within business find themselves, because it's a start-up, they are just forever managing but never leading.
Absolutely. If I can be totally honest, one of the reasons I wanted to come onto this programme with you today was because of her, in actual fact. It's like, crikey, we've got this program in place. That's exactly what she's talking about. That's what we're talking about. Here's the process to really help that work.
Just goes to show it all does tie together. If you're wondering what we're talking about, it's Business Connections Live. Susan Armstrong. Can't remember the name of the program. I will find it very shortly for you. Maybe one of the team will find the name of the program. Really, really great show. By the way, if you're linked in with me at the moment, I did put the key points from that particular program up on LinkedIn. I think it was on Friday. I did that. So if you, it's just really good advice. And she's been through it, and she actually understands. It is, are you a leader or are you a manager? And there's maybe a question you need to ask yourself occasionally. Any more points on our blind spots?
On the blind spots, I think that'll do. As I say, we've got 14 if you want to go through all 14 at some point. But we've still got some more.
That's another program. We've still got more to go. Let's go back to our graphic that we've got here of our organisational excellence. Gordon really getting into the swing of things now. So we're going to be talking about people and processes now. So let's talk about people.
Well, exactly. So basically, we need to, having identified what the skill set is that we need from our people, we've got to work out, well, have we got the right people in place? And if we haven't, we've got to then recruit them. An obvious point, but so often, when we do that organogram and we haven't got that person in place, now it could be that we've got to take somebody internal and give them something new to do, or if we haven't got that person, we then need to recruit them from the outside. So therefore, we then need to work out which employees are we going to keep, which ones we're going to perhaps gently have to weed out. Are they, maybe they were right at the time, are they still right? And therefore we can...
Because businesses change, don't they? And a start-up is different, and you see this even with the leaders.
Yes.
Somebody that is ideal for a start-up business may not be right for a business that's established and running well.
It could be. But as you say, certainly as the business grows, hopefully it's then got the resources to take on those more people, and therefore we need to again establish the budget, the resources we're going to need to hire that person and then to keep that person. And sometimes, this is always the chicken and egg, sometimes we need to hire people before we can, in theory, actually handle them. Because but the thing is, if we know what the vision is, if we know, going back to that planning, if we know where we're going, then there shouldn't be so much of a risk, because we know that in 3, 4, 5, 6 months' time, we're absolutely going to need that person up and running. But if we wait until we're in that position and then try and recruit, it takes a good 6 months to hire somebody that's good, particularly if it's a salesperson. So, and that's too late. We're now 6 months behind plan. So that's the reason why all of these things have to tie in together. So we need that process. We need that people planning as well. And then we can work out what the processes are going on to that next...
Let's have a look at the graphic again. We're cracking on nicely, by the way.
That process is, in effect for us, that's just one step, would you believe? Now it's a big step. Where we work out what are the processes for the business, not just for the sales process as you were talking about, but for all of the processes. I'm thinking, for example, they're not actually a client of mine, but it's an accountancy firm who are in the process of franchising themselves, and they've got written down a page for absolutely every single thing that needs to be done. So even though they are qualified, everybody in that business is qualified, they know perfectly well what's required. There is a process written down so everybody can check against it. It's like a checklist to make sure it's absolutely followed through.
In many respects, the whole franchise model is a good way to run your own business, isn't it? Because if you're trying to explain to somebody how to run a duplicate of your business, a franchise of your business, you've got to do that, haven't you? You've got to strategize it and put it into lists and processes and procedures.
Absolutely.
And that's a good piece of advice, actually, I think.
So from that point of view, there's not a Sandler thing, but the E-Myth or the E-Myth Revisited, fantastic book, is exactly talking about that, isn't it? It's really sort of, as you say, making our own business franchisable, even if we don't actually franchise it. As you say, that kind of process, that kind of thinking, what's the space in the organogram, and how do we fill that place? It could be with our existing people. It may need people further down the line to actually fill that position in. So that we've got. Let's
bring the graphic up again. So we've done very well here. We've done planning, positions, people, processes. Performetrics so that's where we are now, isn't it?
We are indeed.
That's where we are right now.
If we're making notes.
I mean, just go to show you. So then, let's talk a little bit about about that then? Let's go down the process of what we need to remember about that.
Well, indeed. I mean, you were quite right in suggesting that it's maybe a made-up word, and it is. Let's be honest. But it's a good word. I like it. It's that hybrid between performance and metrics.
Well, it seems to me the important thing there was to actually have a P at the beginning of it.
Well, maybe it's easier to remember, but more important. But it is that. It is the metrics about performance. So therefore, if it's the metrics about performance, we've got to establish what the metrics are for each individual. And we're not talking about just...
Do you think we don't do that enough? We don't know, because we don't really have any map of where we're going.
Right.
We don't know when we've started, don't know when we're midway, we don't know when we get there.
Right, yes, absolutely, all of that. But metrics for all employees, that includes the business owner as well. You know, what the business owner also has to have his own metrics, as what he's supposed to be accountable for. Everybody should be accountable for the things that they're supposed to be doing. It's obvious as soon as you say it, but are those things written down? Is there any way that they're being held accountable? What are those metrics? Because we need to conduct a regular performance review of those metrics for everybody. And then we can conduct an employee survey, and then we'll create a tracking report. So it's that nice circular thing. So we're absolutely, everybody knows what it is they're supposed to be doing at all times, and therefore, and also, so that's the internal. But also, we ought to have ideally an external board, not just an internal board, but people who are actually helping us from the outside, whether that be our business mentors, and we need to keep track of that as well. So that keep them accountable and us accountable to them. So that's what
it just seems to me that if you don't do that, then you don't know whether you're succeeding or moving forward at all. You
Right.
have no indication. And maybe the only indication that many businesses will have whether they're being successful or not is whether their cash flow keeps coming in. Maybe they're using the cash flow as their metrics on how successful they are.
It's a good metric.
It's an important metric, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, take the cash flow away, you may not have a business at all.
Cash is king. I mean, it's the one thing that will kill a business, as we both know, is cash flow. But that's only one metric, and I'm talking about the metrics for the individuals, not just for the business. Each individual should have their own metric. You know, how many calls have they made if it's a salesperson? How effective have they been in the accounting function, if that's what we're talking about? How effective have they been at handing over to a client if it's a question of a service that we're dealing with face to face to a client? What did that actually look like? You know, how well was that achieved? What kind of client satisfaction surveys are we doing? What sort of feedback are we getting from them? All of these things need to be absolutely tracked and logged and reviewed on a regular basis. And then there's that very last, very, very important...
Which we'll talk about. Are we moving on to the next segment? We'll do that in just a second. Let's just remind ourselves once again of our journey, in fact, that we're taking at the moment. So we kicked off at planning, the positions, the people, the processes, performetrics, made up word. And in just a moment, probably one of the most important things, because if you don't have the passion within your organisation, then perhaps maybe what you're going to find is that people won't have the motivation to move forward with it. More about that in just a moment. My guest on today's show is Paul Glynn from Sandler Training, Southern Counties. You're watching Business Connections Live. Great to have your company as always. Really interesting programme today. By the way, if you are interested, the programme we were talking about with Susan Armstrong was on leadership and how to lead like a CEO. It was Business Connections Live 238. Check that program out. She was an absolutely fantastic speaker. Seeing her again, I think, next Saturday. So looking forward to doing that. But just an amazing woman. Some great information, and I think comes at it as well, not from the normal typical theoretical point of view, but comes at it from a very practical point of view, lessons that she has learned in industry as well, and that you can apply in a positive way to your organisation and to make differences, to make changes. There are a few leaders out there that I know, and you see this when you go into corporate customers. There are some organisations that are led with fear and bullying. I did a whole thing on do you live in an organisation that is managed by bullying, and you've probably come across organisations where people are managed in the name of so-and-so wants this because so-and-so is the guy that everyone's scared of. Why should anybody be scared in this day and age of anybody? So you shout loud. The fear actually is not in the person. The fear is in the fact that you could lose your job. That's the fear, and that's the only control they have in you, because after that none of it really matters a damn. So just think about it for a moment. And what's the other thing they say about we talked about psychopaths. Where do you find psychopaths? You find them in prison and managing large multinationals.
True.
Which is true because of the characteristics are very, very similar. As I said, Business Connections Live 238, Leadership and How to Lead Like a CEO. Susan Armstrong is the young lady in question. Really great program. And if you watch that one and then watch this one together, that will give you an afternoon of training that is just absolutely got a huge value on it. Okay, very quickly, thank you very much to all the people downloading the program on iTunes. We appreciate that. It really does help. It's very easy to do that. We'd like you to leave a nice review, say something nice about the program. It's dead easy to do it. You just go into your iTunes account like this. You find the program in iTunes. So view the show. We're nearly there, Paul. View the show. He's looking at his watch now. View the show in iTunes. Find the ratings and reviews tab. Click on that. And then what you need to do is you need to say, Paul Glynn, absolutely exhilarating. Found it fantastic and informative program. I'm going to give Paul 5 stars. Leave that. And what will happen then? The algorithm that is used in iTunes will then recommend us as a business program to other people watching alternative business programs. The audience will grow, and that's great for everybody. Hurrah! So if you can do that, go onto your iTunes account and just leave a great 5-star review about the program. In fact, leave any review. If you think the whole thing's just a waste of space, then say that. I don't care. Well, I do care. But, whatever you think, tell us what you think. It's really important to us here at Business Connections Live. Today we're talking about organisational excellence in your business. Paul Glynn is my guest. He's a Sandler trainer and his area of care is Southern Counties, in fact. So if you're down south, but there are Sandler trainers up and down the country, aren't there?
Oh yeah, there are 27 of us across the UK.
And do you offer effectively the same kind of support to businesses?
Absolutely. Yes.
If you want to find out more about Sandler, you can go on to their to the website. So here we've got, this is Paul's variation of the same thing, and you'll see there's an email at the top of the screen. But tired of up and down sales reports? Do you want predictable, constant results every quarter, every month, every day? You need a trainer who can also be a trusted advisor, partner and consultant. And you can see all the different things, what their clients are, the business solutions that they provide, and then how they do it. Do you worry that your training investment will have no accountability or measurability? From what I've known of Paul, it is all about accountability and measurability, because that's important. That's the metric that they're judged by. What's the point in paying them loads of money if you get nothing out of it? And then all the support material is there as well from their bookstore. If you want to go onto their website, the website address for that is?
For that
Sandler?
It's just simply www.sandler.com.
And if they want to go to your variation?
It's southerncounties.sandler.com.
There you go, Southern Counties. We got there, southerncounties.sandlertraining.com. It's a great resource there. There's all sorts of things on it. If I just go back up to the page, who they work with, the solutions that they offer, we're just looking there, sales management, leadership solutions, online solutions, the resources, webinars, complementary training, videos, summits, white papers, newsletters, and the books as well. You can find out also about what is different about the Sandler approach and why it's so different. Also some of the different things that are coming up in the future, and also the opportunities if you get really involved or you're really interested in Sandler training, how you can become involved and be part of it as well. So then, okay, let's talk a little bit more. Let's get the old graphic up again and remind ourselves of where we are so far. We're at number 6 right now. We're looking at passion. Tell us more. We like a bit of passion here on the programme. Tell us a bit about the passion.
Well, certainly. I mean, you were absolutely exhibiting it very, very well. Thank you very much, Aditi. At the end of the day, it's that passion has got to be evident to everybody throughout the organisation. I think perhaps that's the most important thing that a business owner or a business leader can bring to an organisation. It's that total dedication to what it is that's supposed to be happening. Passion doesn't have to be over the top, but just that real sort of drive that everyone can absolutely feed off and realise, that there is that charisma, if you like, that's very, very attractive and makes people want to work with you. If you are charisma free,
yeah, that's obviously going to hold you back a bit, isn't it? I mean, is it essential to have that charisma, or is it the enthusiasm? Can you not be charismatic, but be enthusiastic?
I think if one is enthusiastic, one's got some sort of charisma anyway.
Right, okay, I'll go with that then.
Yeah, but
They've gone very, very quiet in my ear.
Have they?
Yeah, they've gone exceptionally quiet in my... They've been passionate, they're telling me. They've been passionate. You be careful now, all right. Yeah, but so... That charisma, that belief in the daily company, can that sometimes cloud the judgment, though? Have you got to control that charisma, control that passion in the business so that you still see the wood from the trees?
That's the reason why we've got these 24 steps. You're absolutely right. If all we've got is passion for what we're doing, and we're just going out there and spending all the time doing it, and without really realising that the planning and the processes and the people and the positions and the metrics we're supposed to be having in place for all of that, then we're going to be fine. We're going to have a good business, but are we going to be an excellent business? No. If anything, we're likely to be an at-risk business, one that's absolutely at the mercy of the winds and tides of fortune in business. And as we both know, that's a dangerous place to be. If we want to be an excellent organisation, passion is important, but we've got to have everything else in place as well. That's only step number 24.
Can we just bring the graphic up one more time, and we look at this, and we 1 through to 6: planning, positions, people, processes, perform metrics, and passion. What is the biggest issue here? Is it that people would look at that process there, and maybe where they start is they don't start with planning, but they start with passion, and they cherry pick from that selection, or maybe they feel that their natural bent is processes, so they start with processes. They don't start with the planning at the very beginning.
But it is a circle, though, as you saw. I mean, so it kind of... planning is the right place to start, obviously, but it's only then the beginning of the next cycle as well.
Are you saying you could nearly start anywhere on that circle?
I'm not, actually. I'm suggesting...
Just making absolutely certain.
Yeah, I certainly strongly believe you've got to have that planning in place in order to make the rest of it make sense. However, what I'm trying to say is the passion isn't the end, the planning isn't the beginning, it's a continuous circle. You have to keep going back to the business plan, you have to keep going back to those metrics, you have to keep going back to what's strong and what's weak in the organisation. We can't stand still. It doesn't stand still. There's no such thing as standing still in business. You're either going forward or backwards.
Do you think in each of those individual sections as well, then, can we have it just one more time? I know, I'm very demanding today, but do you think that when you're in the positions part or the people part of this, that you do draw on the other sections? So, for instance, you're talking about people, you're drawing on their metrics, their passion, and how you're planning using them along with the processes. Is it this is the overall, but each of those individual sections also can go through that 6-step process as well?
Basically I'm saying that you have to have those 6 stages done, but I think what you're saying is, are they just purely sequential, or do they run in parallel? And the answer is no, they've got to run in parallel, absolutely, but we've got to consciously have gone through each of those things in order to make sure we've ticked everything off. That's the point. I mean, in the sense that in theory, you don't need any help at all from someone like Sana to do all of this. It's self-evident. The question is, yes, but have we ticked off every single thing? Have we made sure that we've done it? Have we spent time with somebody outside of the business to keep ourselves accountable to the fact that, yes, we have absolutely looked at it, ticked it off, gone to the next thing? But you're absolutely right. All those other things are then still coming up behind us as regards, do we have the right people in place? And we're not going to wait until section people to come to that conclusion. It might be something we need to look at today, but that's the reason why it's a continuous process. But at least we've got to make sure there's some sort of process we're going through to make sure that we're absolutely strong. So we go from that well-run business to the excellent business.
Look at that. He's nearly spot on the numbers when it comes to timing as well. It is that time actually where we ask you to give us those key takeaways at the end of the programme. Straight down camera number 4, as always, is what we're going to ask you to do. Don't forget, say who you are, where you're from, and it's organisational excellence is what we've been talking about today. I hope you found it really interesting. I know I have. And I think whenever Paul comes on the programme, I always find myself going away thinking, should be doing that. should be doing that, should be doing that, and so it goes on. And maybe we all need somebody. He's a bit like he's the devil or the angel sitting on your shoulder, going, no, you don't need to be doing that. You do need to be doing that. And you know, we all need those checks and balances in the things that we do within our business. Today, respond back to somebody on LinkedIn. Talk to them. Start a conversation. Isn't that what the email says every time, doesn't it? Somebody has just linked in with you. Start a conversation.
Absolutely.
How many of us actually do? The successful ones do. That's who do it. Okay, straight down camera number 4. The airways are all yours. Who you are, where you're from, please take it away.
Thank you. My name is Paul Glynn from Sana Training.
Oh, I tell you what, just before you go any further, come, because that's there. I like you to be there, because Ralston's not there at the moment. So, from the top, take 2.
My name is Paul Glynn from Sana Training Southern Counties. If you want your organisation to be excellent rather than just average or well run, you need to look at the 6 Ps. That's to say planning, positions, people, performetrics and passion, and work on a plan to get there. We at Sana have identified 24 different steps, and if you'd like to follow those and reach organisational excellence, perhaps you need to contact one of us.
Is that it?
That's it.
Short, sweet, and to the point. Don't forget, you can also go along to their website as well and find out a little bit more about what Sana are all about as well. Once again, a fascinating program. If you want to really get the real nuts and bolts of what we've been talking about today, don't forget, you can just rewind the program and you can watch it again, absolutely free, here at Business Connections Live. Paul, as always, a pleasure having you on the program. I find every time you come on, the very first time you came on, I always say this to you, you made me feel uncomfortable because the way you were talking about sales, and I could just, everything you said kind of resonated with me, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up with a slight embarrassment, and it was a great show. And from that, I always enjoy our conversations, our debates when we do it here on the programme. So once again, thank you very much for coming on today. Listen, coming up on future programmes, who we got lined up for you? Well, Deborah Hume from Minerva Engagement is going to be on the programme in the near future, neuroscientist, so she's got some interesting stuff to say. Louise Punter, CEO, Chamber of Commerce, is going to be on the programme. What can the local chambers in your area do for your organisation or for your business? Well, we'll find out, won't we? Don't forget, if you want to, you can also sponsor the programme or you can support us with Patreon. Don't forget to like the show until we do it all again next Monday. Thank you very much indeed for watching. But from Paul Glynn and myself, Steve Harlan, have a great week from all the team here at Business Connections Live.